Hi there, Space Cadets. Welcome back to You're All Doomed, the podcast that's slicing and dicing its way through Jason X 13 futuristic minutes at a time. I'm Brian.
I'm BFG.
Well played. This segment begins with Professor Lowe and Sergeant Brodsky doing an Aaron Soren walk and talk and ends with the futuristic-looking space cockpit. So Professor Lowe is still trying to convince Brodsky that he wants to wait and sedate Jason rather than blow him to pieces. Brodsky's not so sure of this, so Professor Lowe tries to tell him that there is other considerations to take into consideration, financial considerations. So then Professor Lowe starts throwing out numbers until he gets to 500,000 space dollars, but this seems to catch Brodsky's attention. We cut to the weapons room that Sergeant Brodsky just walks into and starts barking orders to the cadets. He asks Kicker if Dallas is still missing, which we know he is. He tells a female blonde named Briggs to find him and bring him up to speed. He asks a guy named Condor if he has the BFG, which he clearly does because he's holding a big fucking gun. He tells a meathead named Sven and a female named Gecko to go to the starboard pontoon of the ship. Brodsky then tells all the grunts that he promised Lowe that Jason will be taken alive. He then pauses and says, "So after you blow them all to hell, put one in his leg so we can say that we tried."
I like that touch. That was nice. They divide and begin searching the ship. We see two of them entering a dark room. And at first, I thought they were dressed sort of like BMX racers. But then it hit me. They're actually dressed like predators. They have these individual plates that cover small sections of their body, shoulders and, lower arms and part of their torso. And then they also have this quilted bodysuit underneath. But in the way this shot is lit, it looks kind of like the mesh grid that the Predators have underneath their armor. So it's very lightweight looking and not at all like combat armor or even like those power suits from the G.I. Joe movie or something.
And their blood is neon green.
This is Kicker and Briggs, and as they search, they stumble upon Dallas and Azrael's remains, so they are clearly prowling through the holodeck. Briggs startles Kicker by sneaking up behind him, and that to me indicates that they did not have a military advisor on set to instruct these actors how to deploy in any realistic fashion.
Meanwhile, Sven and Gecko are commencing their search, and they find a blood trail that's heading toward the cargo bay. Just then, Brodsky radios and says that he, Condor, and Kicker will take the main cargo, and everyone else is instructed to take the port side of the ship.
We then enter the cargo bay where we find Crutch, the engineer, working at his tool table, and he's surrounded by some interesting scenery. He's got a bunch of cool-looking terrariums and all sorts of hardware all over the place. I kind of like this little set. I would enjoy working there. It's kind of got a cozy atmosphere to it. Crutch happens to see in his iPad's reflection that Jason is standing behind him. And he whirls around and ducks just as Brodsky and two of the troopers light Jason up with their pulse rifles. Though taking many shots, Jason then vanishes.
Jason was right in front of them when they were shooting him, and the workbench was behind him. So how the hell did he get away without anyone seeing it?
Yeah, it's sort of a Batman moment. So that's what that feels like.
I also like that this BFG that was so important to Brodsky didn't really seem to do anything different than the other guns that the guys were carrying.
None whatsoever, yeah. I mean, I thought it would be like a laser cannon or something, but it's just more bullets. Sven, Gecko, and Briggs arrive. So they split up and begin to search more widely. One guy walks past a conspicuously hung upside-down drill bit.
My only complaint about this scene is that you've got all these characters that have split up, but all the locations look the same. So I have absolutely no idea where anyone is in relation to the rest of the team. Like we just know they're in different places, but like, are they right around the corner? Or are they on the other side of the ship? It's just really very disorienting. And I can't really get a sense of this room that they're in and, what could potentially lie ahead of them.
Yeah, their proximity to each other is baffling. We also haven't known these characters long enough to be able to differentiate them. So, I mean, I had to go back through this sequence many, many times just to decipher who was who. And even my notes are kind of garbled as to exactly which soldier is which.
To illustrate your point, Jason sneaks up from behind one of these people and drags him into a tight corridor and snaps his neck.
Turns out this is Sven. He's had his neck slowly snapped. He was played by Thomas Seniuk, who was in the Steven Seagal masterpiece Exit Wounds. His most recent credit was 2003, so I get the sense that he is no longer in the industry.
Briggs and Gecko are now together, and they don't know where Sven is. We do, but they don't. Condor is apparently up above in the rafters, which is fitting for his name, but he doesn't really see anything. And that's because Jason has made his way from killing Sven, wherever that was, and up into the rafters behind Condor. The two get into a brief scuffle before Jason punches Condor over a railing where he falls and impales himself on the aforementioned upside-down metal spike, which is really lame, but the fact that he corkscrews down the spike is pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I like the idea of this kill. The CG that they had to use is a little bit janky. But I do like that we have the shot of him getting punched onto this drill bit. We cut away for a quick check-in with the students in Lab 1, and then we cut back to Condor and see his eyes flicker shut. So he was alive the whole time he was corkscrewing down this drill bit. That was a nice touch. Condor was played by Steve Lekesu, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who's primarily known for stunts. He did a bunch of stunts for the movie Whiteout, The Boondock Saints 2, Cinderella Man, and Best Picture of the Year, Shape of Water. I will say that this kill is slightly undercut by Briggs and Gecko finding his remains and being radioed, what's his condition? He's screwed. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
They resume their search, and I like that the extent of their realistic soldiering consists of pointing with two fingers, like a flight attendant. I tend to point with two fingers and then underline with a third, just for emphasis.
Meanwhile, back in Lab 1, for some reason, the Grunts' radio conversations are being transmitted into the lab where the rest of the gang is hanging out listening.
I love that.
Do you really?
I love that. I think it's great that they are hearing all of this unfold and shitting their pants the whole time.
It's like they're watching an episode of like Live Cops or something.
It's so great.
Rowan can tell that, the shit's about to hit the fan, so she says that they've got to pull the troops out, but, Lowe is insisting that everything is under control because he's a moron. Down in the cargo bay, or wherever the hell all of this is transpiring, Gecko, acting like the elite soldier that she is, walks backwards for at least 20 feet until she backs into Mr. Voorhees. Jason then slices machete across Gecko's neck.
She was played by Amanda Brugel, who's been in a bunch of stuff. She was in the Catherine Reitman comedy Working Moms, Snowpiercer, the series, and The Handmaid's Tale. So she's still working pretty steadily. Kicker, who sees all this happen, then sees Jason standing in front of him, and it freaks the little guy out. So he fills Jason with lead, which causes Jason to fall backward onto some sort of cargo grapple. Kicker then hits the button, causing Jason to be hoisted off the ground, which is kind of cool that he's got this big anchor in his back, basically. Then, just to really seal the deal, Kicker shoots Jason's knees with his BFG. This does not stop Jason, however. He unhooks himself from the grapple, drops down to the ground behind Kicker, and swipes with the bone saw. Kicker is cut in half, but we get a nice shot of the top half of this little guy crawling away, trailing blood and entrails behind him.
He also manages to radio to Briggs to get everyone out of there, because he's like, oh, we're fucked. You might want to leave.
Kicker was played by Barna Moritz. He was a background college kid in Good Will Hunting, had a role on Queer as Folk, and played Joey on Gilmore Girls. He's done primarily TV and a bunch of stuff since, all the way up to 2015. Brodsky hopes to come to his team's assistance, but is startled when Briggs's body comes swinging out of the darkness. She's been impaled on the cargo grapple and is now dead. Briggs was played by Dylan Bierk. She was on Beastmaster the show, so apparently there was a Beastmaster TV series, as well as the Marvel mutant ripoff Mutant X. Her last credit was in 2011, but most interestingly to me, she's actually the sister of Sebastian Bach, the lead singer of Skid Row.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it when I saw that. Ricky was a young boy. He had a heart of stone. Lived 9 to 5 and he worked his fingers to the bone.
Now we're going to have to pay for that.
It's so obvious to me now. Like, I didn't realize it until after I'd watched the movie and did my research, but it's so obvious to me now because she looks exactly like Sebastian Bach.
She looks exactly like him. She's apparently very private now, doesn't have much of an online footprint at all. So she does not embrace the stage and the spotlight the way her brother does. Apparently, she's one of 8 kids, so there are lots of Bach siblings running around. Brodsky is on the hunt, but Jason punches through a shitty tinfoil wall and grabs him from behind. I do like that a spike comes through Brodsky's body. But he grunts and says, "It'll take more than that." And then a second spike comes through his body, which I thought was hilarious, except Brodsky then says, "That ought to do it." And I feel like Tom McLaughlin, the writer and director of Part 6, would not have included that line. He would have let the audience say that line out loud to participate in the movie, sort of like with the "don't leave home without it" joke. And I feel like Brodsky saying that is just beating us over the head a little too hard with the comedy.
Yeah, the humor is a little too self-aware in that moment. Like, we could have connected the dots ourselves when that second spike goes through them and be like, "Oh, that ought to do it."
Yeah, and it doesn't really fit Brodsky's personality either, so it seemed a little extraneous. But I loved the moment.
Back in Lab 1, now that the grunts have been disposed of, Professor Lowe is insisting to his students that none of this would have happened if they had listened to his request to wait until they got to Solaris. Just then, there's a bang at the door to Lab 1. It's Crutch! Oh, thank God, Crutch is okay. Remember Crutch? It's Crutch, everyone. Sooneron tells Crutch that all the grunts are dead, and then Professor Lowe radios up to Lou in the cockpit, who's piloting the ship. So we cut to the cockpit and see Lou, and he says that they're almost at Solaris, and he's taking the ship out of hyperdrive. And we get one of the lamest coming out of hyperspace effects I've ever seen. Once out of hyperspace, Lou informs the Solaris that they've got a real goat fuck of a problem on board. And Solaris asks what the problem is. Jason shows up behind Lou and kills him in a way that splatters blood all over the console. So R.I.P. Lou.
Lou was played by Canadian stand-up comic and actor Boyd Banks, who worked with David Cronenberg in Crash as well, was also in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, appeared in Cinderella Man, and was also in Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead.
He was also in a movie called The Jesse Ventura Story, which I absolutely have to rent. I ain't got time to watch this movie.
I'm a little disappointed that they didn't call it Goddamn Sexual Tyrannosaurus, The Jesse Ventura Story. But this segment ends on the Grendel approaching a very delicate-looking dome on the space station Solaris. The death count is 6, basically all of the soldiers that were deployed to hunt down Jason.
To find out how many pokes in the ribs it would take to put me down, tune in next week to another episode of You're All Doomed. 18 in life to go!